Sichos Chelik Chavav. Again, we're learning from the book Sicha, selections from Likkutei Sichos. We're going to get in English. Likkutei Sichos, volume 26. This is a Sicha about the Mon and the lessons of the Mon concerning the idea of B'tachin versus Emunah, which is also something that we can learn from the Mon. And the Rebbe is going to compare the two Mahaduras. The Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch had one Mahadura, one version, and then he had a revised version. The revised version we only have the first 4 chapters of, and over there it speaks about different lessons we derive from reciting the Parshas Hamon, the Parsha of the Mon, every single day before davening, or in Chabad custom we don't actually recite it every day, but from time to time it should be recited. Okay. Let's learn inside, explaining the rationale for the Torah's ruling. The bold is actually a translation of the actual words of the Alter Rebbe. The non-bold is the connecting things to make it readable in English. That it is desirable to recite the passage concerning the Mona every day. Beis Yosef states that a person should continuously endeavor to cultivate the belief that all his sustenance comes to him through divine providence. That's the reason why it is a preferable thing to recite the Parshas Hamon daily. In the Shulchan Aruch, the Alter Rebbe, in the first edition, known as Mahadura Kama, quotes the ruling of the Torah and the rationale of the Beis Yosef, adding an explanation from the Levush. In other words, the Torah says it's desirable to recite the passage. The Beis Yosef adds to it by saying that this helps us have a belief that all our food comes by Hashgacha. The Levush's commentary explains further why, by reciting the Parsha of the Mon, do we come to believe that all the person's sustenance comes by divine providence. So he says one should also read, third paragraph, the passage concerning the Mana to fortify his faith. Belief, Emunah, is going to be very crucial. The difference in Emunah and B'tachin, that all his provisions are granted to him by divine providence, Hashgacha Pratis. This principle was manifest in the descent of the Mon. The Holy One, blessed be He, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, He specifically provided each man with an omer of manna for all the members of his household. So every person in their household should have an omer worth of manna. As it is written, they measured it by the omer, by a moide ba'omer, v'lo'hedif amar b'mamamit lo'hechser. He had gathered much, had no excess. He had gathered little, was lacking nothing. That is what the Alter Rebbe quotes and brings from these different commentaries. But however, in the revised edition of the Shulchan Aruch, known as Madura Basra, the final version, the Alter Rebbe alters the rationale for reading the Mana passage. Instead of citing the reasons mentioned by Beis Yosef and Levush, he states it is proper to recite the passage concerning the Mana to spur one's trust in Hashem, who provides every man with his food for that day. The emphasis over here, the Rebbe is going to point out, is trust versus faith, as we will explain the difference. There are 2 differences between these passages. The one that Alter Rebbe says in the first version, Madura Kama, versus the final version, Madura Basra. One difference is, rather than using the wording the Beis Yosef, which speaks of Emunah, faith, in the revised edition, the Alter Rebbe speaks of B'tachin, trust. Also in that edition, the final edition, he does not focus on the fact that the Mana was granted by divine providence, Hashgacha Pratis, an omer of Mana for all the members of his household, omer l'gulgolos chol nafshes beisai, but on the fact that Hashem's provision of the Mana in an ongoing manner, granting it every day its daily portion, var yoim b'yoimai, should evoke one's trust, B'tachin, that Hashem will grant each person his food for that day. So the question is, what story of the Mon are we emphasizing? Are we emphasizing the idea of that everyone got the amount how much was necessary, so Hashem's Hashgacha was exact for everyone? Or was it that everyone got every day, they didn't have to worry about the next day? So the Rebbe says these two distinctions appear to be interdependent. One is connected to the other. In the first edition, the Alter Rebbe puts the emphasis on faith and munah. The concept, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, blessed be He, the Holy One, blessed be He, specifically provided every man with an omer of mon for all the members of his household, as it is written that he who had gathered much had no excess, and he who had gathered little was lacking nothing. Strengthens a Jew's faith, the emunah, that his sustenance comes not from my strength and the power of my hand, not koichi and noitzim yodi, because whatever I did, whether I did too little or I did too much, didn't impact the end result. But from Hashem's hashgacha, from God's providence, the daily descent of the manna clearly demonstrated that a man's activities had no effect on the quantity of food that Hashem decided, ordained for, and granted each person. That is Madura Kama. Now in the Madura Basra, with regard to, the revised edition, by contrast, though highlights trust, betachin. Trust implies that not only that a person believes that his sustenance comes from Hashem, but also that he relies on Him with absolute certainty to provide it. That's the idea of trust. You have betachin, you know Hashem is going to give you what you need. The concept of trust derives from the fact that Hashem granted the people their daily portions of manna constantly and consistently. When a person thinks into the fact that dvar yoim b'yoimai, every single day, Hashem gave the people their manna in a way that allowed them to rely on Hashem utterly with no tinge of anxiety, that is the whole idea of trust. In Chayvus Alavavis and Shara B'tachin, he talks about that, like the gauge of a person's B'tachin in Hashem is his serenity and his calmness. That's what he's saying over here. There's no tinge of anxiety, there's no worry whatsoever. So that is the two approaches, the approach of the first version of the Alter Rebbe in Shulchan Aruch versus Madura Basra. Now the Rebbe is going to want to know, but why are there these two different approaches? Why is there the initial approach and why is there the latter approach? Explanation, however, is necessary. What is the reason Beis Yosef and Levush, and similarly the Alter Rebbe in his first edition, focus on the concept of faith, while specifically in the revised edition, the Alter Rebbe gives a different rationale to spur one's trust in Hashem, who provides every man with food for that day. Section 2. On the surface, it would appear that these two rationales lead to an actual halachic difference. In other words, are we reciting Parshas Hamon to foster our emunah in Hashem, or are we reciting the Parshas Hamon to strengthen our betachin, our trust in Hashem? And based on this, the Rebbe is going to suggest, we'll see if the Rebbe is going to continue this, but he's going to suggest that perhaps there's a practical difference as far as when and what part of davening we are actually to recite these two things. Second sentence in section 2, as a preface, it is necessary to clarify one of the differences between emunah, faith, and betachin, which is trust. Emunah is a constant factor in one's life. A believer accepts the axioms of faith with absolute certainty, seeing them as givens. Therefore, they are constant factors in his life, even when their application is not immediately necessary. So the Rebbe is going to give an example for this. Take, for example, the point under discussion, the belief that all one's provisions are granted to him by Hashgacha Prat, his divine providence. It is not appropriate to say that one believes this concept of divine providence leading to his parnasa only during the time that he's involved with earning his livelihood. So when he's going to work, then at that time he has that emunah, he has that faith. On the contrary, this belief is a constant within his soul, that he always believes that Hashem is in control of everything, including giving him his parnasa that he needs. Bitachon is a different situation. Bitachon is when you are challenged by something, that's when you express your trust and bitachon. With regard to bitachon, by contrast, a person's certainty and reliance on Hashem with regard to his livelihood is a feeling that is aroused when he is in need. When he is involved in working to earn his livelihood, he places his trust in Hashem. He has bitachon, confident in the promise that Hashem God, your Lord, will bless you in all that you do. And therefore, he will most surely bless his efforts so that they will bring him sustenance. That's one situation where bitachon applies. To cite another example, when a person finds himself, chas v'shalom, God forbid, in a distressing situation and does not see any possibility of being saved by natural means, he does not despair and wonder, from where will my help come? Rather, by virtue of his bitachon, he trusts with certainty that Hashem, who is the master of nature and can alter it as he desires, will assuredly help him. He knows that Ezri me'im Hashem, that my help comes from Hashem, maker of heaven and earth. Moreover, his bitachon itself serves as the medium that draws down deliverance from Hashem, satisfies his needs. The bitachon, because of his trust in Hashem, that earns him that what he trusted him, he is rewarded for that trust by actually receiving it. So bitachon is like a tool to be able to receive your needs in a situation when things aren't looking too good. And here the Rebbe is going to bring in an explanation in the Sicha that we also study about at length on Parshas Shmos, about how can one be sure that Hashem will grant us our needs. What is the basis for bitachon? This highlights one of the fundamental dimensions of the attribute of bitachon. On the surface, there is a point requiring explanation. Bitachon means that a person relies on Hashem to bring him the kind of good that is manifestly recognizable as good. Not only does Hashem know in a manner transcending human understanding what that person is undergoing is for his good, so even if chas v'shalom a person is suffering, it's ultimately good. That's not what bitachon is. Bitachon does not mean that even though I'm suffering, I believe that what I'm going through is for my good. But bitachon means, but the person himself should be able to perceive that is good for him. That bitachon means I have trust that Hashem is going to bring down such a type of good that I will accept and see that this is something that's good for me. Seemingly, the fact that the person was placed in that distressing situation may well be because his conduct was deficient and he was deserving of being punished. The very fact that he needs bitachon, like we said before, something's wrong. Something is lacking physically. Why is something lacking in his physical realm? It could very possibly be because he's deficient spiritually. So if that's the case, if so, what basis can there be for his bitachon that Hashem will certainly not punish him, even though the punishment is also ultimately for his own good? We know that Hashem's punishments are not punitive, but they are for the benefit of the person. So why am I so confident that he will not punish me, but instead grant him revealed and recognizable good, even though it could be that it not only could be, it's definite that even the negative is something that's good for him. Moreover, how can his bitachon be absolute and genuine without any doubt, to the extent that his mind is completely at ease, which again, we mentioned before, this is the gauge of true bitachon according to the way the Chavis Halavavis explains it. How can he be certain that he will not be punished, even though that too would be for the good? Definitely, even if he suffers, it's for his benefit. But so how is he so sure and batuach and trust that, but rather will be granted, revealed, and recognizable good? The above question can be resolved as follows: when a person displays utter bitachon in Hashem, and regardless of the outlook predicted by the workings of nature, in other words, regardless of what's going on, he has a simple and absolute trust that Hashem will provide him with overtly manifest good, open good, revealed good. His bitachon itself elicits beneficence from above. Hashem responds to him midah keneged midah, measure for measure. For as the Torah tradition declares and rules, responding measure for measure, midah keneged midah, is Hashem's characteristic mode of response. Hashem grants one who trusts in Him overtly manifest good without considering or calculating at all whether he is worthy of it. So therefore, the person, even though he may not be worthy of good at this time, but the bitachon itself elicits Hashem's good. So therefore, bitachon is a tool, a vehicle to draw down Hashem's brachas. And therefore, it is something that is used in times of need, that when things are, he needs to go to work and he doesn't know if it's going to turn out well, he has bitachon. Or if things are actually not turning out well, he has bitachon. And that elicits Hashem's brachas from above. Going back to the original point about the distinction between bitachon and emunah, that emunah is constant, but bitachon is as needed. So he says in 3, from the above, it is clear that the attribute of bitachon, meaning one's actual arousal of bitachon, involves asking for what one needs. Having bitachon is related to davening. When a person is busy seeking to provide for his necessities, he trusts in Hashem, confident that Hashem will supply what he needs. So it's like a tefillah. It's not exactly the same thing, but tefillah functions as a means to bring down Hashem's brachas. So does bitachon act as a tool and as a means to bring down Hashem's brachas. Consequently, according to the rationale that the recitation of the passage of the Manna was instituted to arouse a person to trust in Hashem, it is possible to say that, and here he's going to explain the difference that's going to come out in halacha between the Badura Kama and Badura Basra, if it is emunah or if it is bitachon, the reason that we recite Parshas Hamon. If this is as a tool to bring down Hashem's brachas, this passage should be recited only during the week, on weekdays, but not on Shabbos. When we are not to make such requests on Shabbos, we're not supposed to daven for personal needs. A parallel can be drawn to the manna itself, which did not descend on Shabbos, although it provided man with his daily sustenance. So then we should not recite the Parshas Hamon during Shabbos. B, another difference lahalacha. If the reason why we recite the Parshas Hamon is as a tool similar to tefillah to draw down Hashem's blessings, even during the week, the passage concerning the manna should not be recited at the beginning of one's prayers. To cite a parallel, with regard to requests for what one needs, our sages teach, a person should always first set forth the praise of the Holy One, blessed be He, and then pray, meaning request what he needs. So that's why the Siddur has all the praises of Hashem, and then finally in Shemoneh Esrei, the Amidah, that's when we get to the requests. So therefore, similarly in several Siddurim, the passage concerning the manna is positioned after the prayer service. After we finish davening, there's the Parshas Hamon, and recited together with a prayer and request for one's livelihood. They have a certain Yehi Ratzon that they say to ask for parnasa, because before davening is not a time to request things. And if the reciting of the Parshas Hamon is a bitachon that is supposed to draw down Hashem's brachas, so it's similar to a request. If it's similar to a request, it should be after we already praised Hashem during the introductory sections of davening. By contrast, according to the rationale of the Madura Kama and the Tur and the Beis Yosef and the Levush, that the recitation of this passage was ordained to fortify one's faith, the emunah, it is also appropriate to recite this passage on Shabbos and also before the tefillah, the prayer service, which is, you're supposed to be Mesader, Shvach and Shalmakim, sets forth God's praise, since faith in Hashem, also with regards to one's sustenance, must be a constant manner. So you can't say, you can't have the faith until after davening, or you can't have it on Shabbos. No, it's the same every day of the week. But the Rebbe says this distinction, however, requires clarification, because even in the revised edition, which states the rationale to spur one's trust in Hashem, the Alter Rebbe doesn't say, then if so, you got to recite it after davening, or if so, don't recite on Shabbos. The Alter Rebbe writes explicitly, it is proper to recite every day the passage concerning the Mana. The wording every day seemingly includes Shabbos. So we see that even according to explanation that this is a matter of evoking bitachon and increasing our bitachon and trust in Hashem, it's still recited on Shabbos when we're not supposed to make personal requests. Also concerning the location, which part of davening we recite this in. Similarly, with regard to the point in prayer, where this passage should be recited, the wording of the revised edition appears to indicate that the only difference between it and the ruling in the first edition is with regard to the rationale for reciting the passage. However, it is not that the difference in the rationale brings about a difference and a limitation when the passage may be recited. This is also indicated by the fact that even in the Madura Basra, the revised edition, the Alter Rebbe includes the law regarding the recitation of the passage concerning the Mana with the law regarding the recitation of the passages concerning the Akedah, which is the binding of Yitzchak, the Aseres HaDibros, the Ten Commandments, and the Karbonis, the sacrificial offering, all of which are recited before prayer. If you want to tell me that according to the Madura Basra, where the reason why we are reciting the Parshas Haman is something that has to do with tefillas and should be recited later, it doesn't hold true from the way how the Alter Rebbe just combines it with all the other things that are recited before davening. So therefore, there must be that there's no halachic difference. The two halachic differences that we stated before, whether we recite the Parshas Haman to increase our emunah or we recite it as a state of bitachon, do not have these halachic ramifications differences, and therefore the question thus remains: what is the reason for stating a rationale in the revised edition that differs from the first edition, the Beis Yosef? Why does the Alter Rebbe change it in the Madura Basra? So he says in section 4, to resolve the above question, we should first add a further point, analyzing the approach to trust reflected in the conduct of Rabbi Yosef Sover, Rabbi Yosef the elder, as described in the Zohar of this week's Torah reading, in connection with the Mana. And in connection with that, the Zohar brings down the following story. Every day, Rabbi Yosef would prepare his meal only after requesting his sustenance from Hashem. As he would explain, a meal should not be prepared until it has been given by the king. This calls for an explanation. The food for the meal was already in his possession and only needed to be prepared. He had it in the cabinet. As the Zohar states, he had his food for that day. The food was there. What then is the meaning of his request that Hashem grant him his food? It is possible to offer the following explanation. Our sages teach that Yosef was punished for asking the Saramashkim, for having requested of the chief butler, mention me to Pare. That's what we know happened with Yosef HaTzadik. And that's why he ended up sitting in prison another extra 2 years because of the whole story that happened over there with him. On this teaching, Rabbeinu Bachya comments, heaven forbid, chas v'sholom, that Yosef HaTzadik, the righteous, should place his trust in the chief butler, the Saramashkim. He trusted in Hashem alone. He only felt that Hashem had engineered his encounter with the Saramashkim, with the chief butler, so that he could perform a miracle through him. Yosef realized and knew that was all min hashamayim, but he felt that the Saramashkin was the keli, the vessel, the vehicle through which the miracle would help him. If so, according to Rabbeinu Bachya's explanation, so why was Yosef then punished? If he believed in Hashem and Hashem was providing the miracle through Saramashkin, why did he have to sit an extra 2 years in prison? Because in the Sar HaMashkin he sought an instrument, a causal factor, a siba, through which Hashem would send him his salvation. And it is not fitting that tzaddikim of his stature, of Yosef HaTzaddik's stature, should seek a siba, a causal factor. He was punished because he should have trusted that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, the cause of all causes, the sibas hasibas alone, would provide him with the appropriate causal factor without his seeking it, that Yosef didn't even have to intervene. Hashem would already take care of it. This comment of that why Yosef was punished has been questioned. With regard to B'tachon trust, it is stated in Chovos HaLevavos, in the famous Shara B'tachon, that there is an obligation to seek causal factors, to what's called, to look for sibos, in the language of the Shara B'tachon, through which Hashem's beneficence will flow. And this thesis is supported by several proofs, including what Yosef's own father did. Yaakov Avinu did all types of things to deal with Esav. He davened, and he split his camp into two, and he sent Esav gifts. So we see that you are supposed to do things in the physical world, and the Bechai brings other the Shar B'tachon it brings down also other examples of tzaddikim that looked and found physical things to bring about and to manifest the good that had to come out. Why then was Yosef punished? For seeking an instrument through which the divine assistance would be expressed. This has been answered by explaining that there's two levels of trust of B'tachon. A, the natural mode. There are times when the manner in which the divine beneficence is elicited and proceeds to descend follows ordinary norms. In other words, it's going b'derech hateva, by the rules of nature, conforming to the natural pattern. As expressed in the language of Chassidus, this mode characterizes the descent and flow of divine energy that is called memale kol almin. Memale kol almin means the divine light which invests itself in the world. On this level, it is necessary to seek an instrument and to find conduits within nature. One needs to find what the Shar B'tachon calls sibois, needs to use natural means. For this form of divine influence of memale kol almin is conveyed specifically through the conduits of the natural order. It comes specifically through derech hateva. It needs the way of nature. It needs the derech hateva. Let's go to the next page. B, a supernatural mode. There are times when it is obvious. A supernatural mode in B. There are times when it is obvious that Hashem is relating to a person or the Jewish people as a whole in a way that beneficence is elicited down in a manner that does not accord with the pattern of nature. As expressed in the language of Chassidus, this mode characterizes the flow of divine energy that is called Sovev Kol Almin, divinity that transcends all the worlds. When Hashem relates to a person in such a way, a higher level of trust is required of him. When Hashem is in that type of way that's beyond any type of level having to do with nature. He is expected to rely solely on Hashem's control of existence, taking no steps whatsoever, rather trusting that Hashem will certainly help him by arranging an appropriate conduit for his blessings. Yosef HaTzaddik, the righteous, who was always connected with a level of godliness that transcends nature, should have conducted himself in a manner that reflected the loftier level of B'tachon. And that's why he was punished, because he failed to live up to these standards. Section 5, the difference between these two levels of B'tachon applies even when one does fashion a conduit for Hashem's beneficence. A person following the first approach is required to make a conduit because Hashem relates to him in such a way that Hashem's beneficence is elicited according to the pattern of nature. That's why he needs to make a keli, he needs to make a vessel, he needs to do something that makes sense in the natural order of things. Accordingly, nature and natural process acquire a certain standing. Derech hateva, the vessels of nature, have a value. As a result, he must seek a conduit and an instrument through which Hashem's blessings will be conveyed to him. That is, if a person is following that first approach. This is not the case with a person who trusts at a loftier level, who needs to take no steps whatsoever, only to trust in Hashem. The process of nature are of absolutely no import in his eyes. This is why he need not seek out a conduit or instrument, like Yosef Atzadik was not supposed to. Hence, even when a natural conduit or instrument for his livelihood exists, he does not consider his livelihood to be any closer to him because of it than it would be if that conduit did not exist. Since neither the conduit nor the instrument in its own right is of any importance in his eyes, his sole perception of the situation is that he receives everything directly from Hashem. Indeed, he views even the conduit or the instrument as created for him by Hashem together with his livelihood. Just like the parnasa is coming down for Hashem, the vessel, the vehicle that he's using for the parnasa is also something that was created by Hashem. This also explains why Rabbi Yosef the elder would say, we will not prepare the meal until it is given by the king, even though he had his food for that day. Rabbi Yosef's approach to B'tachon was such that he perceived every single activity not as his own doing, but as made possible by Hashem. Hence, even when the food was already in his home and needed only to be prepared, he felt that it was not his food that he was preparing, but that was being given by the king. At that very moment, Hashem was giving it to him. Therefore, he felt it necessary to request this food of Hashem, just as he would ask Hashem for his food when it was not in his possession, because this was not about his doing at all. It was all Hashem's doing. It was all coming and being derived from Hashem. Even the preparation, even his own physical doing, that itself was Hashem's giving him. So now, in section 6, he explains, this explanation enables us to clarify another aspect of the conduct of Rabbi Yosef the elder. From the wording of the Zohar, Rabbi Yosef would not prepare his meal until he requested his sustenance from Hashem. It appears that Rabbi Yosef conducted himself in this manner even on Shabbos. We said before, you don't ask your personal requests on Shabbos. This presents a difficulty. Shabbos is not a day when we request that our material needs be satisfied. How then would Rabbi Yosef pray for his daily sustenance even on Shabbos? In the light of the concept discussed above, that Rabbi Yosef saw his food as being granted to him by Hashem at every moment, we can gain a new understanding of what it means to trust Hashem and rely on him. Praying for the satisfaction of one's material needs on Shabbos is out of place only when the individual is focusing on himself, meaning when he is requesting that his needs and wants to be fulfilled. A person is not allowed to be mevakish tzrochav, is the expression. Bakashas tzrochav. The prayer of Rav Yosef the elder was not of an entirely different nature. It was not about his needs. What impelled his prayer was the very fact that he was utterly devoid of self-concern, to the extent that at every single step he felt that everything depended on Hashem. In the spirit of the verse, God desires, Hashem desires hamiyachlim l'chazdei, those who long for his kindness. The Zohar interprets that phrase as referring to those who yearn and wait every single day to ask the Holy One, blessed be He, for their provisions. In other words, their prayer is solely an expression of their longing for His kindness. Their prayer expresses their feeling that everything comes only as an act of Hashem's loving kindness. And praying for one's sustenance in this manner, it's not bakoshas tzrochav. He's not asking his needs. He is just longing for Hashem's kindness to be manifest. It is befitting even on Shabbos. It says in 7, true, the conduct of Rabbi Yossi the elder is not in its entirety something that every person can emulate, where he doesn't pray for his own needs. It's only about seeing Hashem's loving kindness. Nevertheless, in microcosm, his approach is relevant to everyone. At the very least, at certain times, a person can have that inspiration to just yearn for Hashem's loving kindness and not be concerned about his own personal needs. Herein, it can be suggested the difference between weekdays and Shabbos. During the 6 weekdays, when a Jew goes about his affairs as set out in Shulchan Aruch, doing his business honestly, preoccupied with his livelihood, he trusts in Hashem at the level at which he seeks a natural conduit and instrument. In that setting, he cannot be expected to utterly transcend nature and to manifest the lofty level of trust described above, the second level, where he doesn't give any value and import to the vessels and vehicles through which, the conduit through which it comes down. There's the trust in Hashem, and Hashem gave him the means, now that he focuses on the means to bring down and manifest Hashem's bracha. In that setting, he cannot be expected to utterly transcend nature and to manifest the lofty level of trust above. We said it already. Shabbos, by contrast, is not a day of ordinary activity. At that time, a Jew is elevated above everyday work. On that day, he must attain at least some semblance of the superior level of trust, the trust of those who long for his kindness. On this basis, it is possible to explain the difference between the Alter Rebbe's wording in the first edition of the Shulchan Aruch and the wording that he employs in the revised edition regarding the recitation of the passage concerning the Manna. The Alter Rebbe composed the first edition of the Shulchan Aruch according to the rulings of the Talmud and halachic authorities. On an apparent level, meaning according to Nigla, the revealed dimensions of the Torah, B'tachin requires making a conduit, making a vehicle for Hashem's blessings, so that one's trust in Hashem goes hand in hand with his own work and effort. Accordingly, were the passage concerning the manna to be recited in order to spur one's trust in Hashem, it would be appropriate only during the weekend, only after prayer, as noted in section 3, because then it is considered an activity that's like asking your own needs, and you're not allowed to ask Bakoshas Tzrochav on Shabbos, asking your own needs on Shabbos. Therefore, in his first edition, the Alter Rebbe states that the rationale for one's daily recitation of the passage concerning the Manna every day is to fortify his faith that all his provisions are granted to him by divine providence, by Hashgacha Pratis. For as stated in section 2, this faith is constant, relevant daily at all time and in all places, even on Shabbos. It has nothing to do with his personal requests. In his revised edition, on the other hand, is a difference of opinion between when there's in the revised edition, Madura Basra, when there's a difference of opinion between the halachic authorities and the Kabbalists, the Alter Rebbe rules according to the Mekubal. Accordingly, he also includes a course of conduct that reflects loftier levels of divine service, and therefore he mentions the rationale to spur one's trust in Hashem, who provides every man with food for that day, in keeping with the lofty level of betachon displayed by those who long for his kindness. That is not about his own personal request. And therefore, it is appropriate to recite the passage concerning the manna every day, even on Shabbos and even before davening.